Alright. Hi, everybody. My name's Jessie Webster. Jessica is my birth name. My mother calls me that. You could call me Jess. You could call me J-Webs. Some people call me J-Dub. I have no preference. Other than I don't really feel like a Jessica. I only really let my mom call me that. But other than that, I'm fair game. Welcome to my podcast. I think this is a podcast. I'm still trying to figure that out. Mainly, it's a place where I want to have conversations. So hopefully I'll be able to do more like guest conversations and bring my friends into this. But mainly, you might just have me most of the time. And that's okay too. We'll have fun. So basically, I'm calling this Some Things Matter, and the name came from, I was having a conversation with my friend a few months ago that I still think about because it was good. Anyways, we were talking about this stupid problem that I was having with a boy, and she was counseling me through it, and she was like, you know what, Jess, nothing matters. And that's kind of her life motto, and it's not in a negative sense, it's more in the sense of, in 5 years from now, is this going to matter to you? No, nothing really matters that much. It's not that deep. You're thinking about it too much. Just make a decision. It's fine. It's going to be fine. And I'm thankful that she said that because it really did help me figure out what the weight of that situation was. Is this something that matters? No, it's not. So move on. And I have kind of taken over the same motto, but I've switched it just slightly to Some Things Matter. And it helps me organize my issues and organize my thoughts. And it helps me decide hey, is this something that actually matters? Is this thing that I'm obsessing over, this thing that I can't get away from, is this something that is of weight, or is this something that I have just obsessed over for no apparent reason and it's wasting my mind, my time, my energy? So I think that this podcast is going to be about identifying the things that matter and learning to just let go or laugh at the things that don't. And I think that can be really prevalent, specifically in the Christian community. We can get very caught up on things that simply don't matter. They don't hold that much weight. We're arguing about stuff that are just silly at the end of the day. And so this podcast is my way of giving a space for the people who want to talk about things that actually matter, and the people who want to listen to people talk about the things that actually matter, and be able to ponder it and meditate on it and decide for yourself if you agree that this is something that matters or not. So anyways, I hope that this provides at least some thought-provoking episodes. I hope that this is something that is slightly entertaining, and I hope that at the end of the day it makes you want to know God more. It makes you want to dive deeper into His Word. It challenges you to say that's interesting. I kind of think that that's not true. Well, let me go figure out why I think that's not true and figure out if I'm right or if she's right. Or the opposite. I've never thought of it that way. Let me go find out if that's true. I would never want you to take my word for it because I'm definitely not qualified for you to base your life decisions and your theology off of my thoughts and my research. But I do want it to be a thought-provoking space. That's the goal. Hopefully I achieve that goal. I don't know. I guess we'll see. But today, I thought that it would be appropriate to talk about callings, because it's something that I think that a lot of us can relate to this. It's something that I really struggle with, and I've really gone back and forth because I so badly want to be like in the center of God's will. If you're a church kid, if you grew up in church, you've heard that a million times, like you always want to be in the center of God's will. And at times that can be like, that's a really good ambition. Like that is something that we should all strive for. But sometimes we can strive so much for that we miss the ease of a life with Christ. There are parts of your walk with God that do not need to be so complicated, and do not rely on your ability to get it right. We give ourselves too much responsibility sometimes, I think. Not that we don't have responsibility, but maybe I'm saying that we just put too much emphasis on what we do and how we do it and when we do it, and less on God and his ability to work things out for us. So basically, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about our callings. And whenever I've heard people or pastors talk about this, I've just noticed that sometimes they will emphasize that, like, your calling is the Great Commission and the Great Commission alone. That is the only calling you need to think about. That is the only calling you need to worry about, period. And then some pastors will emphasize, like, the Lord has a plan for you and only for you, and you need to dive deep and you need to figure out what that is because you don't want to miss it. And while I think two very good points, I think we can find a middle ground here. I think that we can find the importance of both the collective calling for the church and your individual calling, because they both exist. So let's talk about the collective calling for Christians. Prime example, the Great Commission is one of our collective callings for Christians, to go and make disciples, bringing people to Jesus, bringing people into the church to show our light that the Lord has given us, right? That is a calling that we all have. Another calling would be, for the collective church, another calling, if you're a Christian, is to love. Love God, love yourself, love each other. It's Jesus would say it's the greatest commandment, right? Is to love. So that is certainly a calling for each of us. We're called to stewardship. We're called to steward the earth. We're called to steward our responsibilities, our money. And I feel like, it's obvious we're called to seek God, right? We're called to learn more about God. Therefore, we learn more about ourselves in the process. But the goal is to know God, to love God, to see God in our lives. So I would never want to diminish that. Obviously, if that is the calling for all of us, if that is the calling for every single Christian who has walked the earth, who is walking the earth, who will walk the earth, then it's important to God. So the weight of that should never be diminished. It's so important that we do what the Lord has commanded us to do collectively. And I think that in at least in like the Western world, we are like very individual thinkers, and we're very focused on our own individual lives. And while I think that can be, I don't think that's inherently bad, but I do think that it can hinder us from understanding principles in the Bible, because historically speaking, like in the Bible days, they were way more focused on their community, and they were way more focused on like, how do we collectively do this together, and not so much how do I do this alone. So it's hard for us to understand that the calling on the Christian community is as important, if not more important, than the calling on our own personal lives. So understanding that is huge, not just because we want to love and honor God. Obviously, that is our essence of being Christians, is to love and honor God and bring him glory, and that is how we do it, by obeying what he has told us to do. But I think that if we're going to get to our second part of this, which is like, how do I find my individual calling, the key, one of the most beneficial things that you could do when you're trying to figure out what your calling is in the Lord is letting him find you in the place that he last put you. Letting him find you doing the last thing that he instructed you to do. So if you haven't heard a direction from the Lord, if you're unsure completely of what he wants you to do, what his plan is for your life, if you have absolutely no clue and you're feeling very lost, first of all, I've been there. I kind of am there. And I know that until you understand that he's already told you a piece of the puzzle that he's waiting on you to see the significance of, and he's waiting on you to take up responsibility and live out those principles, then I'm not sure why he would move you on to finding your calling. If he can't trust you with what he's already told you, I don't know why he would say, oh, here, like, now go do this, even though you didn't do the last thing I told you to do. It just logically doesn't make sense to me, and biblically I don't think you can find where he's done that before. So that is kind of the collective portion of that, and why I think that's so important, and we should emphasize that. I think if we're moving on to how to lean in and how to know if the Lord has a plan for you, first of all, he does. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, thus says the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." So right off the bat, we can confidently say that the Lord has a plan for each one of us. Period. And that is so easy because we know that scripture so well, because everybody has heard that basically. The weight of it can be lost on us sometimes. And I would just like to emphasize that when you hear that, you should take a deep breath. You should sit in that. You should think, wonder at how amazing it is that the Lord has already thought of a plan for you. The dogs. So we know that God has a plan for us. It's written in his word. No one can argue with that. I think that this is where I get both excited and stressed at the same time, because I'm like, wow, the Lord has a plan for me. That's good news. The part where I get stressed is I start to think about what would happen if I miss it. And that really stresses me out. I start to feel fear in any decision making. I feel like I can't make a single decision because I want to know that it's the exact right thing to do. I'm terrified of making a wrong decision. I've had so many conversations with the Lord where I'm basically just screaming, tell me what to do. I just want to know what to do. And I think that is obviously a little dramatic. Because if we're framing this correctly, in the sense of God is good, God is all-knowing, God cares for us, then he's not going to let you miss it. If you're chasing after the Lord, if you are steadfast in your convictions, if you are living every day to honor him and to live a holy life, he's not going to let you miss it, like, period. And I think that you're probably not going to know what your calling is, because who knows why, right? Only the Lord knows why he keeps certain information away from you. But, like, even just think about, this is just a small little tangent, but think about Abraham, when he was promised a son. I can't think of the verse and chapter, but anyways, doesn't matter. We can look it up later. Abraham was frustrated with God because he wanted to know how he was going to get a son. Like, God had already promised him a son, but his life circumstances made that very confusing because biologically there was just no way. His wife, Sarah, was barren. She'd never had kids before. On top of that, she's very old at this point, and he was old too. So, anyways, Abraham is, like, basically being very persistent and demanding that God tell him his plans for him. And so God gives in eventually and tells him that, you will have a son, blah, blah, blah. And when Abraham knew that he was still going to have a son, amidst these crazy circumstances, he basically felt the need, he and Sarah felt the need to rationalize it in the natural instead of letting a God of the supernatural do his thing, right? They had to rationalize it, and they thought, well, okay, Sarah, am old and I can't have kids anyway, so it's clearly not going to be from me, it's going to be from my servant Hagar. Forgot her name for a second. And that'll be like the Lord giving us a son from someone in our tribe, basically. And so they sin against God and try to make God's plan work in their own understanding of life and of their own understanding. And they screw it up. Like, obviously they don't screw up the whole story. The Lord still redeems, which is good news for us. But because they knew a part of the story, it really messed things up, because they then took matters into their own hands. Whereas if the Lord would have kept that from Abraham, had Abraham not been begging him to reveal to him what was going to happen, then perhaps they wouldn't have made that mistake. Perhaps. So I think that's a good example of why the Lord withholds information from us, because we are not smart enough to handle it, basically. We don't have the knowledge, we don't have the understanding to handle all the details of what he has in store, because then we would start manufacturing, and then we would start taking things into our own hands instead of organically letting it happen. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think that's something that we should just learn to, like, trust the story in that. I think that is from that little example that I just gave. I heard that from the Baymont podcast, and I really recommend you check them out because I learned a lot from them. But that was a very thought-provoking illustration that he gave, and something that I hadn't thought of before. But it does challenge you to trust the story that the Lord is building, and humble yourself enough to know that the Lord gives you the information that you need to know. While I believe that the Lord has larger callings on our life, I think that we have little, like what I would classify as assignments on the way to our calling, right? Like little preparation moments to like mature us, to strengthen our character, to get us into a better position to be able to steward basically the calling that he has placed on our life. So I get that from Corinthians 3:18. It's the chapter it's a verse in the Bible that's talking about the Lord bringing us from glory to glory. So that would indicate to me that he has multiple assignments, multiple callings on your life that he is bringing you through. An emphasis on he is bringing you through. Like you're not doing it alone. He's doing it with you. That's huge. So I think that that really helps me not over stress about missing my calling, because I know that there's preparation for my calling. And I know that the Lord is fully aware of how imperfect I am as a human being. And he set this up so beautifully that if I miss an assignment, it's easily redirected, right? It's like, let's say he just wants me to keep going straight down this path, but this path is barren and I am tired of it, and I see a shiny object over here that I think, oh, this is my saving grace, let me go this way. And while I was supposed to go straight, and maybe I was just ignorant or stupid or whatever, I go a different direction than what the Lord had intended for me. The Lord is still faithful, and I've seen this in my life. The Lord is still faithful to bring me back around to where he had originally wanted me to go. My little route may have taken me the long way. It may have caused me unnecessary hurt. It may have put me in situations that I didn't even need to go through. But the Lord can still use it to teach me a lesson and bring me back to where he originally wanted me, so that I'm still en route to the calling that he has placed on my life. That, I can't tell you how much peace that understanding has brought me. Knowing that I'm human and I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to take the wrong path sometimes, but the Lord is faithful and he will always bring me back to where I need to be 100% of the time, as long as I am a vessel that is willing to be moved, as long as I am humble enough to say, Lord, I think I made a wrong turn, can you help me? He will. He totally will, because I've seen it. I've seen it in his word. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in my friends' lives. I've seen it in my family's lives. I know him to be a God who has empathy and like understands that we are just so imperfect as human beings. So I think that if you struggle with that mindset like I have, of just wanting to make every decision right, I hope that brings you some peace. And I hope that, you can just relax in the knowledge that the Lord is faithful no matter if you screw up. And you will screw up. And I think that in the past I've been really tempted to wait until I hear the audible voice. This is God, apparently. I don't know what I'm doing with my hand. The audible voice of God instructing me, basically, right? I've wanted that for so long. And sometimes I hear it. Sometimes I hear the voice of the Lord, and I still don't know why I heard it. Sometimes I hear the Lord speak to me in ways that I've not seen come to pass, to say it in a weird biblical way. But there have been situations where I am sitting and I'm stubbornly saying, Lord, I will not make a decision unless you tell me audibly what to do. And he just doesn't tell me. And he just sits and waits for me to make a move and trust the guidance that he will give me along the journey, and trust that I think it's, what I'm getting at is, I think that it's important that we learn to trust our gut, our intuition. Like, if you've been walking with the Lord, then you start to learn about his ways, and you start to understand what he would guide you to and what he would guide you away from. And I think that he wants to mature you to a place where you know him well enough to know, like, this is something that he could potentially have for me. And if he doesn't want me to do this, he will make it very clear. And to be able to trust yourself in that, and trust the Lord, more importantly, that he will not let you fall. Like, I think part of my demanding spirit is just completely out of fear that I will fail and that I will embarrass myself, and that it's like a prideful thing where I'm like, Lord, you tell me that this is going to be fruitful, or else I'm not making a move at all. And sometimes I think the Lord is just like, it's like, what if you do it and you fail and you get embarrassed? Is that like a big deal? Because it shouldn't be. I think this podcast is actually a really good example of that, because I desperately wanted the Lord to give me a sign, to tell me, oh, you should do this, and this is going to be so impactful for so many people and for yourself, and like, this is going to be so fruitful. Because I didn't want to be embarrassed. Like, I didn't want to put myself out there. I didn't want to just try and see if the Lord will meet me here, because I am too prideful. And if nothing else, this is an opportunity for me to exercise. If nothing else, this is an opportunity for me to get out of my comfort zone and allow the Lord to humble me. If nothing comes of this, it literally doesn't matter, because I know my God to be faithful, and I know that he's going to use me in some way. And if this is not the way, that's totally fine. Will it sting? Yeah. But will I be okay in the end? Yes. And I think that those are lessons that we have to learn. That sometimes the Lord is not going to make it clear. He's not going to make it easy. He wants you to exercise that part of your faith in acknowledging that, like, this is something that you feel interested in. This is something that you feel skilled in. This is something that you want to attempt, and there is no reason why you can't do it. There's no reason why you shouldn't do it, like, biblically speaking. So just go for it. And if the Lord shuts the door, then say, okay, what else can I try? What else could he be leading me to? And not putting such a weight on it, like, this is just a thing that we're doing. And hopefully it brings glory to God. And if it doesn't, he will tell me. He just will. He will. Yeah. So I think that those are, like, basically all my thoughts. I think that to, like, tie this in a bow, the last thing I would just say, which I feel like is kind of obvious, but an obvious theme throughout this conversation that we've been having, is that you have to be in good relation with the Lord to hear from him. You have to be consistent in meeting with him every single day in order to know him, right? If you do not practice reading his word, if you do not practice sitting in his presence and worshiping him and getting to know what he feels like, what he sounds like, what just the essence of who he is. I don't really even know how to explain it, but if you haven't experienced that, and if you don't consistently put yourself in a position to experience that, then you are going to be lost. You are not going to know which way to go. You are going to miss opportunities to partner with the Lord because you were not diligent in knowing him. If you do not know him, you will not know where he is trying to get you to go, because it's like trying to talk to someone who speaks a different language than you. If you don't learn their language, you're just not going to know what they're saying. And the Lord has a specific language that he uses to communicate with us about, and you have to learn it, and you have to know him. So I guess I would preface all of this with that if you're not first seeking the Lord, good luck trying to find the calling for your life. You just probably won't find it. You have to know who it is you're following. You just do. Yeah. So I think that kind of wraps this up. I think that a word of encouragement I would give is if you're in a season right now that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy, and you're thinking, what am I doing wrong? This is like horrible. I would say that I wouldn't automatically assume that you're doing something wrong. First of all, I would encourage you to evaluate yourself, and to figure out for yourself if there are things that you turned away from in the Lord, if there are instructions that he gave you that you are like completely ignoring, then that would indicate that you're in the wrong place, right? But if you are faithful to the Lord, if you are consistent in knowing him, and you are in a season that absolutely sucks right now, know that he hasn't forsaken you. Know that this is an assignment that he has for you, or something that he is allowing to happen to you to grow you, to strengthen you, to get you to the point where he can use you for this miracle. He can use you for this assignment, for this calling. But you have to go through this to get the character that he needs you to have in order to even withstand what he has coming for you. So I hope that encourages you in some way. I wish that I could say that this would be so easy, and that glory to glory means that you're just like going from one happy moment to another happy moment. But I actually think that it means that like the Lord will basically, glory to glory could mean going from one happy moment to another. It totally could. But it could also mean the Lord saving you from one situation and taking you to another, and maybe neither were exciting to you or happy for you, but glory meaning that he got you out of it and he moved you on to something else. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that doesn't make a ton of sense, but in my head, I just think that anytime the Lord rescues me from a situation that I have been upset that I'm in, to me that is like him, that is like a glorifying moment for him. That is like a moment of like, thank God, that's my glory moment, right? And I just feel like he takes you from glory to glory. Hopefully this was beneficial. Yeah. And I would like, if you have any thoughts, which I hope you do, I would love for you to comment down below so that I can read your thoughts and that we can continue the conversation in the comments section. That would be really cool. Or, I don't know, if you know me personally, shoot me a text. Because this kind of stuff is really exciting to me. I love talking about the complexity of God. He is so complex. The life that he's created us to live is so confusing sometimes, and that's the fun of it. Like figuring out who God is and knowing him and knowing his creation, that's what life's all about. So anyways, all right, that's it for me. Okay, bye.